Europe. Uh, People commented, "Oh, there's never been a tableau like this before." I am just stunned, and I know some of it's for show because they're trying to make the president not side with Putin. There's some element to that, but the fact that they all flew to the White House, they all sat there with J.D. Vance, who lectured them, and the president, who they've complained about what a Philistine he is and how he's trying to destroy NATO, etc. And it was like one big happy family. And obviously, this needs to sustain if they're going to be involved in continuing to support Ukraine, whether there's an agreement or maybe even especially if there's not, because if there's not, there's going to presumably be the arming Ukraine with the Europeans buying American weapons and some of the maybe all of the restrictions taken off to allow Ukraine to start attacking Moscow. If that happens, my goodness, there's going to have to be unity. So, Dan, describe the contours of going forward. Let's not be retrospective. Going forward, how solid is the Trump-Vance relationship with old Europe?
It's pretty solid right now. I think it goes to what we just talked about, which is it appears they're all in agreement that there has to be some sort of security guarantee for Ukraine, and that the United States, I would be surprised if we put ground troops there, but that we're going to provide some form of logistical intelligence support. So I think in that regard, it's good. Look, they all got the memo, Zelensky, the European heads, about how Trump likes to do business. And ultimately, they are the beggar. They need us to remain at the table. They need us to remain, neutral / aligned with Europe and Ukraine, but have a relationship with Putin to try to end this. So I think they are all aligned. I think where the problem comes in is if Putin doesn't agree to this, then the question is, Trump's willingness to say, all right, we may be there for another 2 or 3 years at a cost of, $100 billion, $150 billion to the United States, but I'm not going to let Ukraine be lost on my watch. That's the big.
Sean, what's your view going forward of how solid this is?
I think it depends on which leader. You look at Mark Rutte last night, the comments that he made were unbelievably spectacular. Talking about the fact that nobody but Trump could have done what he did in Europe and NATO. I mean, say what you will, Dan, but the bottom line is, first of all, Rutte is in a special case. He has a pre-existing relationship from his time as prime minister. They have a strong bond. I think in the case of Italy, very strong. I think you look at Macron and Starmer, probably not as strong. So it's a continuum of people who really like him, who get along with him well, and then people who are saying what they have to. I would say Starmer, Macron, probably on that end. Ursula is probably in the middle, and then you start going down the other way of real, friends kind of general support. But I think to Dan's point that he's right. I mean, Europe doesn't, they might have upped in theory, what they want to do for their NATO GDP contribution to national defense, but they're not in a position to take care of themselves. They need us. And that's why they all flew here together. So, by the way, one last point. We've talked about it tangentially in the past as a one-off, but Mark, you know this from your time covering this. If you think about logistically what the White House has pulled off in the last 7 days, a bilat in Alaska of that level, security, diplomatically, what it takes to happen.
Leaving an 8-page fax in the printer.
Of just to be clear, of a seating chart.
There was more than a seating chart.
It was
the menu, Sean. The menu.
Okay,
the menu leaked, Sean. It's a disaster.
Yeah, the Clintons left their Iowa game plan.
Your general point is the same.
But to coordinate what happened yesterday, I think that it doesn't get enough recognition for that team, that White House advance team.
The logistics, phenomenal. The logistics, phenomenal. But again, this is a president who, at the beginning of his term, you would have said he's on a collision course with Europe. And then J.D. Vance goes to Europe and gives one of the most seminal speeches a vice president has given in the modern era, and basically says to Europe, you guys need to grow up. You need to grow up on your economies, your culture, your military. And I was in Europe around that time, and I heard from lots of Europeans, oh my goodness, this is worse than Trump 1.1. Vance is worse than Trump. Disaster. What's happened since then? EU deal on tariffs. And yesterday. And I mean, with Dan, there's a deal. They haven't worked it out finally yet. But Bessent this morning on Squawk was very bullish on where they stand with trade in Europe.
Well,
And
regardless,
Well,
of whether
and-
the ink is
oh,
dry,
yeah.
the bottom line is these guys are not in a position of strength.
This is an extraordinary thing what's happened, and it is for now. Now we don't. There's no deal on trade. There's no deal with Putin. But as a snapshot of where we are at this moment and going forward, at least in the short term, this is an extraordinary turn of events for a guy who was seen and is characterized by the New York Times and Le Monde as a disaster for Europe, as an enemy of Europe, as a person who wanted to destroy relations between the United States and Europe. And to the extent there might be a deal, to the extent that Putin might give in and do what they're trying to get done as a shared project, it is largely because Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and Witkoff and Rubio and Bessent have figured out how to have a strong, positive coalition with Europe on America's terms. Kind of incredible.
By the way, you know, fair on the European criticism, but the domestic criticism from all of the arm chat quarterbacks at the, that are part of the Council of Foreign Relations, et cetera, who said that this was going to be a disaster, that he couldn't get anything done, that his style was whatever. I don't think it's just Europe. I think here in America, we have a lot of people who are eating crow.
That's why I said the New York Times. But Sean, they're not eating crow. You watch the coverage now. Literally, we could flip over to cable now. Even now, I'm not saying we should be giving him the Nobel Peace Prize and saying the deal's done. But even now, all they're doing is emphasizing the divisions. All they're doing is saying, well, they're just there to suck up because they're afraid if they didn't go, they would wrestle Zelensky to the ground in the Oval again.
But also, yesterday they started the whole day. I mean, not just the day. On Sunday, Margaret Brennan was saying they're only coming because they're
right. Yes, that's what I'm saying. That's what
I'm saying.
But they're even saying it after yesterday.
So epically wrong once again.
Yes.
Well, hold on. I think, Sean, to use one of your favorite phrases, both things can be true at the same time, which is they do get Trump. They did fear that coming out of Friday, where Trump had a very different tune suddenly about how he was, what his goals were. And given that Trump, we all talk about it, changes his mind sometimes multiple times in a day, that they all felt we had to drop everything and rush here for the good of our neighbor. But what Mark is saying is also true, which is, and I will be the first to admit it, I am impressed that Trump is leaning this hard into it and has had success to the point where he's gotten the ball to where it is today, which is there is some optimism that this may be brought to an end. And he didn't cave to Putin or roll over, as I think I and other people feared he might. But it's also true that everyone is playing the performative part and they get him. Like the fact that everyone says a flyover was a shot of the bow to Putin is the dumbest thing I've ever heard, that a KGB officer who by all accounts is maybe the most sophisticated long game player ever said a B-2 bomber, oh, they have one of those. It flew over my head. It's loud. I guess I better.
Okay, but then the opposite's true too. Do you think Putin really thinks, oh, they flew a plane over, they love me, they're saluting me? I mean,
no, but I do think he believes that when he says stuff like, oh, you really won in 2020, and Trump goes out and for 2 days talks about it, and then goes out and introduces, I'm going to end mail and ballot.
That I agree with. That stuff is
it
crap,
goes right. I think Putin says, I still got it.
But Putin is not honored by a red carpet. He doesn't care.
I agree. That's why I say when the White House talks it up as this like big show of flex.
But what I'm saying is neither is true.
I agree with you.
All right. Want more great clips like that? I've got an idea. Hit the subscribe button, be part of the Two-Way community, never miss a clip, and you can always watch our full episodes, join them live, go to twoway.tv.